Freezing. But away from those showery areas, actually plenty of clear weather. Plenty of sunshine in the south and the east during Tuesday. Crisp winter sunshine, not a snowflake in sight. But in the north and the northwest, further sleet and snow showers coming in. And again, that snow building up over northern hills. Some patchy accumulations at lower levels as well. Cold day to come, 2 to 4 Celsius, feeling even colder in the wind, which will strengthen across northern Scotland as we end Tuesday, bringing a spell of gales and more significant sleet and snow. I think rain at lower levels for Shetland, Orkney, the north of the mainland, but snow continuing to build up over the hills with blizzards in places. So treacherous conditions in the north of Scotland and further showers coming to Northern Ireland, western parts of England and Wales overnight. But a widespread frost once again as we start off Wednesday. Plenty of bright weather out there, some patchy cloud, but otherwise a fine day to come if you're in central and eastern parts of the UK. Sunny spells, further showers coming into the west and increasingly northeast England as well as eastern Scotland. Then into Thursday, the showers mainly become confined to eastern coasts. Western areas see plenty of sunshine, but it stays cold.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Jubes and Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got us all talking tonight. It's just happened, actually. The British government have put their foot down and they have blocked Scotland's gender recognition reform bill. That's the one that allows kids as young as 16 to self-identify as an alternate gender without, much in the way of stopping them. Many people are outraged by this. Many other people think that it is absolutely fabulous. But what I can tell you is the first time in the history of devolution that this has happened. I'm wondering, where do you stand on it? And Keir Starmer, he's been speaking out about the NHS. He reckons we shouldn't treat it basically like a shrine and that absolutely it needs reform. Are Labour the party for the job? You tell me. And Oxfam says that the richest 1% of people in Britain earn as much as 2/3 of the rest of the country. Do you think it's a problem? Where do you stand on the whole wealth inequality? Does everyone have to have the same? Do we all have to have a little bit less? Let's close the gap. Not up here for so many people and not down there for so many people. What about wealth tax as well? Would you be in favour of that? And if so, at what point? When would you kick it in? What kind of tax would it look like? And what do you think would be the outcome of it? What the benefit would be? And to whom? I want your thoughts on that. And I have to say, the Home Office Minister, Robert Jenrick, has been in a little bit of trouble. This is all about about language that he's been using about Albanians that have been crossing the channel. Many people concerned that Albanians are essentially becoming a bit of a political football. What says you to that? I want all of your thoughts on the above, but first, let's get ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thanks very much indeed. Well, some breaking news that has come to us in the last half hour. The UK government has decided to block the Scottish gender bill designed to make it easier for people to change their legally recognised gender. The bill did allow trans people to obtain a gender recognition certificate without a medical diagnosis. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon calling such a move an outrage, and the Scottish government likely to mount a legal challenge in response. It'll be the first time ministers have used a Section 35 order, as it's called, which stops a Scottish bill from becoming law. Well, in other news today, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner has apologised to all of David Carrick's victims. Sir Mark Rowley has promised action, tweeting the serial sex offender should not have been an officer. Earlier, Baroness Casey, who's conducting a police standards review, has urged the Home Secretary to hold a full inquiry. Carrick has pleaded guilty to 49 offences relating to 12 women, including 24 counts of rape. He's due to be sentenced next month. Suella Braverman has called today a sobering day for the police service.
This appalling incident represents a breach of trust. It will affect people's confidence in the police, and it's clear that standards and culture need to change in policing, and that's why I'm driving forward changes to support the police and to support chief constables around the country in doing so.
And the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has backed Baroness Casey's call for an inquiry into Carrick's case, saying change is needed.
This man was a serial rapist who's committed devastating crimes against women. It's tribute to their bravery that he's been caught, but he should never have been a police officer. He should never have been allowed to serve for so long. After the appalling murder of Sarah Everard, the government promised us change, yet that has totally failed. There have been no national standards on vetting or conduct introduced, and women have been badly let down. We have to have fundamental change.
Thousands of teachers in England and Wales are to go on strike in a dispute over pay. 9 out of 10 members of the National Education Union voted in favour of the action, which will include 7 days of walkouts in February and in March. The turnout of 53% means they met the legal threshold to go out on strike. It's despite Downing Street urging them not to go on strike and inflict what it called substantial damage on children's education. Well, the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, has called the decision disappointing.
It's only one union that has voted to go on strike, and it's really disappointing, with only 53% of their members actually responding. But it is deeply disappointing for parents and children. And of course it will have an impact. It will have an impact on children's education. We all know that during the pandemic they have had a lot of disruption to their education, and we're still trying to catch up from that.
Well, in more strike news, nurses will walk out for another 2 days next month. It says the dispute with the government over pay has failed to reach a resolution. Members from the Royal College of Nursing will strike on the 6th and 7th of February, with more workers set to take part than in last month's action. Nurses at 55 trusts in England are planning to strike this Wednesday and Thursday, but next month could include union members from 73 trusts. NHS providers have called the announcement very worrying. The Foreign Office has confirmed a British man is among one of the passengers who died in a plane crash in Nepal. 72 people were on board the Yeti Airlines flight from the capital Kathmandu to Pokhara. The death toll has risen to 68. Officials say the black box and the cockpit voice recorder have now been recovered, and the Foreign Office says they're in contact with the local authorities as well as supporting the man's family. It's Nepal's worst plane crash in 30 years. The government plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda is to be challenged in the Court of Appeal. That comes after the High Court granted an appeal against its own ruling last month that said the scheme was lawful. Campaigners are still saying it's a cruel policy that will cause great human suffering. No date has been yet set for the Court of Appeal hearing. Jeremy Clarkson says he's emailed an apology to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex for saying he hated Meghan in a newspaper column. Clarkson posted a statement online saying he'd emailed the couple saying his language had been disgraceful and that he was profoundly sorry. In the statement, he added that ITV and Amazon, which airs Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and The Grand Tour, two of his programmes, were incandescent following his column. His comments sparked a backlash as well, with around 25,000 complaints being made to the press regulator. And lastly, the UK Health Security Agency has issued a severe cold alert in response to Arctic conditions due to sweep across the whole of the UK in the next 24 hours. The Met Office issuing a yellow warning for snow and ice across northern England, northwestern England, that is, Northern Ireland and the north of Wales by midday tomorrow. We understand snow already affecting northern Scotland and it'll be there till Wednesday. And there's an ice warning in place now for southwest England, Devon and Cornwall overnight. Wrap up warm. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Back now to Jubes and Co.
Thanks for that. Well, I'm Michelle Dewbs and I'm with you through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me here in the studio, I've got my panel, the writer and broadcaster Dominique Samuels, and alongside us too, John McTernan, the political strategist and a former advisor to Tony Blair. Good evening, both of you. Happy New Year to you. I've not seen you this year. You know the drill, don't you, on Jubes and Co? It's not just about us three here in the studio, it's about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me all the usual ways. Email, which is gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. And as you've just been hearing, there was indeed breaking news tonight. The British government has decided to block Scotland's, what some would say is controversial changes to the Gender Recognition Reform Bill. It was basically a bill, if you've not been following it, which means that kids as young as 16 can self-identify to be the opposite gender. The Scottish nationalists said that any attempt to block it would be, I quote, an outrage. John, you are indeed yourself Scottish. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I think it is absolutely right that the UK government shows that it is in charge. The devolved Parliament of Scotland is not independent. It's not an independent country. If you pass a law which conflicts with UK law, the government has the right to come in. I also think it's very interesting that the SNP have been unable to persuade the public in Scotland. Recent polling shows that at the end of this big debate in Scotland, massive public debate in Scotland, the public are 2-1 and 3-1 against the major proposals that the SNP have passed. So it's interesting they want to pick a fight on this because they're not going to be that popular with the public, I suspect, over all of this. In the end, this is a policy that Theresa May initially came up with, and the Scottish Government have carried on doing the same thing as the UK Government. It's the UK Tory Government that have changed and decided not to make this change. It's a very minor change. Only 30 people in Scotland last year applied for gender recognition certificates. And that number may increase to 100 or so, but it's for a very small number of people, some of the most vulnerable people in the country. It's a sensible and modest reform, which is why Theresa May was for it. So when Theresa May and Nicola Sturgeon agree, I kind of go, well, I probably agree with both of you about making this change.
Well, Theresa May was initially, correct me if I'm wrong, I think she was initially in favour of it. She talks about it. I don't think, correct me again if I'm wrong, that it was in the manifesto. This is all about 2017. It all kind of came about, didn't it?
It was the 2017 government were for it, and it didn't. And there's still some.
And then they had the consultation about it, and then the UK government decided not to progress with it. They did make tweaks. For example, they reduced the cost of a gender recognition certificate, but they weren't, as a government, as a UK government, they weren't in favour of the proposals that matched what Sturgeon did.
The Scottish Government proposals have gone in a particular direction. I think that they're right and humane for trans people who are able who've had to wait, who are actually waiting for treatment, have massive a massive waiting list for gender reassignment surgery. There's all kinds of issues involved in there. And I think this is going to be an interesting battle where the Scottish government are out of touch with the Scottish public and the UK Tory government are in touch with the Scottish public, and who's going to win the battle between representatives, say they speak for Scotland.
Indeed, and we've just, Sturgeon's responded to this. I'll come back to you in a second on that. But Dominique, what's your thoughts on it?
I think it's completely right that this has happened. I agree with what was just said about the government sort of asserting its leadership here, because if there is a bill that it deems incompatible with the laws that we make in Westminster, I think it's only right that it's blocked. But my personal thoughts on the bill itself, I think it's a disgusting bill. As a woman, I think it's a dangerous bill. They rejected many provisions that would seek to protect women and vulnerable children, really, against sexual predators. And it's funny that any concern about this is painted as transphobic. And a lot of the time, it's men, really, that don't see an issue with this. And of course, a lot of men that seem to be on the left don't have an issue with this because these issues all disproportionately affect women. When we're talking about trans people, we're talking about over 70% of these trans people who are biological males. So that means they're going to be wanting to access female spaces. You've got sex offenders that will and have exploited our existing laws here to be able to enter in female prisons. And this issue will only get worse in Scotland. And the argument about it only being a small number of people, that may be true, but as this is being popularised, this whole idea that you can pick and choose your gender and it's being spread to kids, those numbers of people saying that they have issues with gender identity have steadily increased. I mean, just look at the scandal with the Tavistock clinic. So I really do praise the government for taking this step.
Do you, are you in favour of the changes, the bill that was passed? Would you support, for example, Sturgeon and what she was trying to do?
Yeah, I'm broadly in favour of what the Scottish Government have passed.
Are you?
Yep.
So don't you have any concerns? Because I'm not, just to put my cards on the table, I'm not in favour of it. I side with a lot of what Dominique's just said. I think to allow a child, you know, of course, trans people exist. They should absolutely be treated with dignity, care. I do feel like I need to add that caveat. But to say to someone, just a 16-year-old child, you can now just change your gender with no real checks and balances, as long as you just, I don't know, put a skirt on and call yourself Sharon or whatever for a few weeks in Scotland, you can change your gender. I think that has huge ramifications and it doesn't have the safeguards.
16-year-old children are adults in the health service in Scotland and in England. 16-year-old, you know, when a child becomes 16, they're making their own decisions about their health.
A child at 16, for example, in this country, you can't even get a lifelong tattoo.
I know, and I think that I'm personally opposed to the Scottish Government policy of giving 16-year-olds the vote because they ban them from sunbeds as well. So we've got a very confused view about adulthood in the UK. But for the health service, and it's been for a very long time, at the age of 16, you are independent from your parents in terms of making decisions about your health.
But I don't see this as...
But that's for me, that's the one that some people are focusing on. I think for 30 people who are probably some of the most unhappy people in Scotland, to change this and to make it a faster process, I think that's actually a benefit for people.
But what is it actually achieving for people as young as 16? Because when we talk about health issues, we're not talking about going to the doctor because, you know, you've got a bit of acid reflux or something. We're talking about lifelong and irreversible changes that these people want to make to their bodies and to their hormones. And a lot of this is unpopular, but a lot of these issues stem from mental health. The idea of not feeling as though your mind and your body are in sync with each other. And a lot of the time when these issues are investigated, and we've seen the rise of detransitioners as well, many of them wanting to sue the people that were so ready to allow them to make these lifelong changes. What they found is when they actually make these changes to their body, they're still not happy. So I think the first thing that we should be doing with all of these people,
making people happy,
is to investigate what the issue is mentally first before you start wanting to pump people with hormones and have them surgically remove their genitalia.
So look, I think you're absolutely right that people's personal, individual needs need to be dealt with, and the whole person needs to be looked at. There's massive waiting lists in Scotland for access to mental health services, access to psychological support, psychological services. One of the things the SNP spend their time and effort on is trying to pick fights with the UK government, not trying to make life better for people in Scotland. And there's something, across Scotland, it's between, I think it's 3 to 5 years waiting for gender reassignment treatment. So this is the change in the certificates. Something does need to be done about the waiting. Something needs to be done about the access to mental health services. And I do think it's a very small number of people who are some of the most unhappy, picked on people in the whole of our country. And I think that the use of trans people as a political football by some of the people in the debate in Scotland, I'm not saying it in this discussion, I think is respectful of all the complex perspectives here, is, I think, a bad thing. I don't think it can be good for people. And so from that point of view, I agree with Nicola Sturgeon that the people who abuse children and the people who assault women, by and large, are men, heterosexual men. They're not...
Yeah, I think for me, the bit that I found a bit peculiar is because I do believe that there are lots, well, not lots, I do believe that there is a small, tiny, probably minority of people who do have, you know, a medical condition, gender dysphoria, or whatever you want to label it as. And I just therefore don't understand why they've removed that. Because if what you're trying to do is protect genuine people that are trans, why would you remove that aspect of it?
Because it's ideological for them.
You speak about Nicola Sturgeon, and I'm interested in this angle to it, because Nicola Sturgeon has responded to this on Twitter. She says the following, this is a direct quote from Nicola Sturgeon. This is a full frontal attack on our democratically elected Scottish Parliament and its ability to make its own decisions on devolved matters. The Scottish Government will defend the legislation and stand up for Scotland's Parliament. If this Westminster veto succeeds, it will be the first of many. Now, I sense, it's very obvious, that this is now going to become, John, because there's loads of people that actually, quite frankly, A, haven't even read into what this bill, B, don't really care, and C, their emotion is stronger about Scottish independence than it is this particular issue. When you see this Section 35 being invoked, this is actually devolution working as it should, as the Constitution is defined and as everyone has signed up to. But this is now going to be weaponised to say to a number of Scottish people that believe in independence, see, look at what Westminster do. They're overruling you. Well, they're not, actually. They're just following their process. Do you think this will become a tool, a benefit for people that want independence?
I thought the wording that Nicola Sturgeon had in that tweet is very, very interesting. If she thought she had a legal basis for challenging the UK government, she'd be saying in that tweet, we're taking this case to the Supreme Court. We'll see you in court. She didn't say that. She's making it into a grievance, a fight, because I think she understands that the powers are there, because you can make decisions on devolved issues, but some issues which do impact on equality law is UK-wide. You can't make decisions that impact on it. And I suspect that the Tory government, Sunak's government, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's government, have got some strong legal advice. Her attempt to do this is also dealing with her own party. A lot of things that Nicola Sturgeon does is about party management. Her party is split on this issue. Some senior figures like Joanne Cherry, who's an MP down here, Joanna Cherry was forced to be not able to stand for a parliamentary seat in the Scottish Parliament because she is critical of this legislation. Nicola Sturgeon doesn't want to be opposed. Alex Salmond and his Independence Party that broke away, they oppose these regulations. This issue splits the SNP. I know with 2 and 3 to 3, 2 and 1, 3 to 1 opposition in Scotland for these moves. A lot of SNP voters are against this. A lot of SNP members, and I think this is an attempt of diversion, and it's a shame. Nicola Sturgeon won't defend the policy, so clearly she's worried that she's got no legal footing for this, and the UK government are in the right. And maybe it would have been better if, within the first 4 or 5 years of the Parliament, this had been done before. But the Scottish government have been stopped by the Supreme Court for doing things that are outside the powers of the Scottish Parliament. The powers are, and Danielle said it, Dominic, you said it, it's not unlimited. They're not unlimited at all.
And I found out it'll be fascinating to see, but this is going to get galvanised, isn't it, as a weapon for anyone that's basically, if you're even teetering on the edge of independence, you're not quite sure, because it is split really, isn't it? Scotland about half and half-ish,
50-50.
depending on the poll. It is going to be weaponised now, isn't it?
Yeah, most definitely. But I think using this legislation as sort of a battering ram for independence, I think was the wrong call. I think Nicola Sturgeon at this point is a bit drunk on power. I can sense with the way she's behaved with this, acting like a tyrant even within her own party with regards to this legislation. Lord only knows why she's so hell-bent on it, but I have a feeling it's really not going to attract more people to the independence cause if these are the sorts of decisions that she's going to be churning out.
Yeah, are you in Scotland, by the way, tonight? If you are, what do you think to the goings-on of the last kind of few months, this evening, the response from Sturgeon? Are you someone that's followed this bill and you feel passionately about it? Are you someone on the other side that couldn't care less, quite frankly, what the bill is, but you'll go with the Sturgeon line, which is, I'm not having it, Westminster getting involved and overruling us? Tell me your thoughts, GBViews at gbnews.uk. Let's have a look at what some of you are saying at home, though, shall we, right now? John, he's been in touch. He says, by enacting Section 35, the UK government is rightly acting within its constitutional rights. It is called democracy. That's exactly the kind of point that I was just making there. Let me know if you agree. Jim, the government for once has it spot on. But it's not just this. The entire idea that you can become a man or a woman just because you want to is, in Jim's view, stupid and dangerous. David, I agree with the block by the UK government. I recently applied for a job, and within that one question, I was asked to confirm my gender. The option was male, and it also includes trans male. It was the same gender for gender of women. Scott, the blocking of the Scottish Gender Recognition Bill is a win-win for the Scottish independence cause. It was a terrible bill that puts women at risk. Now, I've got to say, this view here is one that's getting a lot of interest as well. Maria said, it's a relief that Rishi has finally come off the fence to support women's rights and oppose the gender recognition bill in Scotland. Warren, what a ridiculous law that the woke Scottish government were trying to bring in. A lot of young people might have regretted the life-changing decision that they'd made at only 16 years of age. And as we were just talking about, it was Theresa May back in 2017. She was on that kind of, on that bus, if you like, that direction, but it wasn't in the manifesto. Corbyn at the time, if you remember, he was saying that he agreed with it and he would have helped get it through. Starmer, he was saying some interesting things at the weekend. He was basically saying, I have concerns about the provision in Scotland, in particular the age reduction to 16, and in particular the rejection of our amendment in relation to the Equalities Act. When he was pushed specifically about 16, being able to change your gender, he said, no, he doesn't think you are old enough to do so at 16. What do you think? I want your thoughts at GBViews at gbnews.uk. And I've just finished on Starmer, and I'm going to start on him after the break, because he says the NHS it needs to be treated as a service, not a shrine. And he says it has to be reformed. Goodness me, I mean, some people have been shouting that for years and months and all the rest of it. Anyway, are Labour the ones for the job? You tell me, and I'll see you in 2.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stumped.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to me, Michelle Dewbs, with you till 7 o'clock this evening, alongside me the writer and the broadcaster Dominique Samuels, and also John McTen, the political strategist and former advisor to Tony Blair. If you've just tuned in, you've just missed us discussing that breaking kind of update to the story, the gender reform bill over in Scotland. The UK government are going to intervene for the first time in the history of that devolution. Section 35 will be invoked. It's split opinions, I've got to say. I'm really interested if you are in Scotland. I want to hear from you. Catherine says, basically, this was all forced through. It was way too quick. Shouldn't have happened. Jennifer says, I'm a 73-year-old Scottish woman and I am extremely unhappy. Our needs in Scotland are being continually ignored because of the SNP's one pony policy, independence. Where do you stand on it, particularly if you're in Scotland? gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address. I have to say, I was talking about Keir Starmer just before the break, which leads me nicely to my next story, because Keir Starmer's been speaking out over the weekend, particularly around the National Health Service, saying if it's not reformed, it's going to die. He says he's going to tackle the bureaucratic nonsense that's holding the NHS back. And we've come up with a variety, well, not we, they have come up with a variety of suggestions as to how they're going to do it. John, you advised Tony Blair. Here we've got this potential Prime Minister in waiting, some people are calling him. What did you make to what he said? He's created a variety of different suggestions as to what he would do to reform the NHS. Did you agree with him?
Well, I thought the big thing was he wrote an article for the Sunday Telegraph.
He did.
Not for the Guardian. So he went to a place that some Labour Party members would be, that's offensive to even go to the Telegraph. So that was good, go to there. And I thought he's right. The NHS can't be a sacred cow. It's got to change because technology's changed, ways of treatment have changed, lifestyles have changed, people have changed. And I think he's right to say, and it's a very Blairite message actually, he's saying you need reform. And Tony always said the health service does need more money. It did need more money after Margaret Thatcher and John Major, but he also needed reform. And Tony brought in the private sector. Almost immediately in 1997, brought in the private sector to do operations. And I think that kind of thinking that Keir Starmer's been exposing and the way that Wes Streeting's been talking, it suggests that he wants to talk to the public and not to the party. And I think that's the most important thing in a political conversation. You've got to involve the whole country in this because people do not think that the NHS is working. And if the people think the NHS is working, you've got to have a plan for fixing it, and it's not got to be just more money, it's got to be a different way of doing things. But
I want to come back to you on a lot of that, but first I want to hear from Dominique.
Yeah, I was really surprised by this, actually. I think this is a very astute thing to do from Keir Starmer, because it suggests that he's actually listened to what the country is saying and what we say week on week on this panel and many others is that we treat the NHS as though it's a religion. Any criticism of it or suggestion of change or the use of the private sector, you're screamed at and told that you want to privatise the NHS, when actually, when you look at many European countries, they have a quasi-private insurance system where it's heavily subsidised by the government, but there is sort of that private sector role that it plays. Whether or not this will actually materialise, I don't know. I'm very sceptical because often we're given a choice between the Conservatives and Labour, and me personally, I'm a bit disillusioned to it all because I look at the state that the country's in and I'm wondering what difference either of them have made, to be honest.
Well, what do you think at home? Do you think the Labour Party would be the ones to get a hold of the NHS and, quite frankly, sort it out? John, you were saying saying a second ago about, for example, lots has changed. One of the first things that you mentioned was technology. Now, my background, as it happens, is technology, IT particularly, IT digital transformation programs. Now, one of the things that we, if you're an external consultant, you're delivering IT rollouts, example, there's a really famous case study, and you know probably the one that I'm going to refer to, and it was in the history of the Labour governments, and it was one of, if not some might say, the worst IT failing project known in the public sector. And it was all about trying to reform the NHS using technology. It completely bombed. It cost the taxpayer, depending on whose reports you believe, anywhere between 6 billion and some people say up to 20 billion. And it makes me kind of worry and wonder whether or not the Labour Party are the ones to do it. Because in Wales, for example, the NHS there has been under the control, the governance of the Labour Party for 20 plus years. And it's in a bad state. Some would say it's in a worse state than the English NHS. So if Starmer has got all these ideas and he's the party to fix it all, why wouldn't you use the Welsh NHS as the kind of guinea pig, if you like, your demonstration platform? Here's how we're going to fix it. And at the next election, we can all look at Welsh Labour NHS and go, see, he didn't just have slogans. They turned the Welsh Labour NHS around.
The first thing that the Welsh Labour Party in government did after devolution was made a big decision, and they've been backed by the voters ever since. They made a big decision not to close small cottage hospitals. They decided to have quite a distributed, quite a system which had small hospitals everywhere. That means there's a lot of costs in your hospitals, not in other parts of the health service. I think that drove a whole lot of the way that they've been managing the health service in Wales since then. That's not the English model. We have big district general hospitals. When I talked about technology, I was partly thinking about the fact that I can remember as a primary school kid the first heart transplant in the world when that happened. And now every local hospital in England can do a heart and lung transplant. So there's a lot of technology, starts as innovative and then becomes very distributed. So some of it's cancer treatment, some of it is that. The other technology I often think about the health services, why do you have to go to a hospital for an X-ray? Why can't a GP surgery do X-raying? That would free up a whole load of people from going into A&E and going into hospitals. There's all kinds of ways of breaking up the tasks. I think you're right. It's a big, complicated system, the NHS. We'd always say on the Labour Party side, trust the Labour Party because we founded it.
But then why the Welsh NHS the beacon then?
Because we've given the Welsh NHS to the people of Wales, the Scottish NHS.
Yeah, but the people of Wales, it's the Welsh Labour Party.
It's the UK Labour Party that will run the country. It's Keir Starmer and the UK Labour Party. And the UK Labour Party is going to run the health service that we have in the UK. And we need a lot of change in the hospitals. We need a lot of change in primary care. A lot of change, I think, the balance between pharmacists and local doctors. Well, and I think that's the areas of reform that Keir's been talking about are where a lot of frustrations are at the moment, getting access to an appointment, getting access to a GP. But we've seen what the pharmacists did in the vaccine rollout. They can do a much bigger role in doing tasks that at the moment you have to still go to a GP for. I've
got to say, it still doesn't wash with me why, if Labour are the party that are going to sort the NHS out, why Welsh NHS is in a worse state in lots of ways than the English one. But anyway, I'll move on. If I was a medical specialist, my bottom would be clenching when I heard some of the stuff that Keir Starmer was saying. And I'll tell you for why. One of the things that he says he would bring in would be allow patients to bypass GPs to make self-referrals to specialists. Yeah. If I was a specialist, I've already got waiting lists as long as 10 of my arms. Now, any old random who thinks I've got a bad back, I know what I need to do, I need to go see Dr. ABC, I'm going to refer myself. Your workload now has quadrupled probably, and then some, because people can self-determine who they need to see.
Yeah, I was thinking that, because surely you're just transferring the problem and actually making the problem greater when you might think you need physio when you don't need physio. So, but I suppose common sense would say that there would be some sort of filtering process before that. It wouldn't be just, here's this number, call it up. Like, there would be some sort of process. Maybe it could be using the NHS app, you know, a questionnaire online or something like that. I don't know.
But it sounds a bit weird to me. Would there be a process?
Most of the referrals to consultants are with people with long-term conditions, and people who have long-term conditions know what they've got. I've got arthritis. I've had arthritis since I was in my 20s, early onset arthritis. I've also got anybody with long-term conditions knows when they need to see the specialist, but what they have to do is go see a GP. So you're putting an extra bureaucratic cost in there. There would undoubtedly be some kind of triaging, but in the American system, where the American system works, in the continental system where it works, in the Australian system where it works, people have a gynecologist. Women have a gynecologist. People have a dermatologist. People have a specialist they have a relationship with, and we have our system. Our system was created during the war, legislated just after the war, and in the bones of it is a rationing idea. Join a queue, and this will be rationed.
Yeah,
and we are very state-controlled, and I think we should trust people more, give them more routes to get in, and as Dominique said, there will be forms of getting information that you can use to go, well, actually, I don't actually need to see a GP. I should see a pharmacist for this one, or I don't.
I don't mean to be rude, right, to the general man on the street out there. Yeah, I don't mean to insult people, but when I hear some of the reasons that people ring 999, I'm sure I heard the other day someone ringing 999 to ask something about a pizza shop being closed.
No.
I heard a story, a paramedic the other day described ambulances as 24-hour Uberlances, criticising people, calling them for all reasons. So you give the great British public a lot more credit than I do when it comes to referring themselves to the right places and not wasting people's time.
I trust the GB News viewers.
Well, you tell me at home then, am I being harsh to you? Are you shouting at TV, calling me names, thinking I'm being a bit rude? You tell me, gbviewers@gbnews.uk. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want some of your thoughts on that last topic, but I also want to talk to you about wealth inequality. Apparently, the top 1% of British people earn more than 70% of those at the bottom. Does that matter? And if so, what do you want to do about it? You tell me, and I'll see you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs and Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Jubes and Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. The writer and broadcaster Dominique Samuels is alongside me. as is John McTernan, the political strategist and former advisor to Tony Blair. Welcome back, everybody. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? What have you been doing that was more important than listening to us three get into the day's affairs here? You've missed us talking about the Section 25 being invoked by the UK government to try and stop the gender reforms over in Scotland, and you've just missed us talking about Keir Starmer's plans to reform the NHS. Lots of you have been in touch about that one. Bernard says Starmer is all rhetoric. He's got no idea how to fix it all. He's struggling to run the Labour Party. Anthony says the first thing to do is basically to fire the incompetent, overpaid managers who are sucking the funds from the NHS's primary purpose. Angela says bringing back matrons would be a good start. I have to say, I hear that from you guys a lot. Mel, I think you make a good point, Mel. You say if Starmer really wants to reform the NHS, he must sit down and listen to nurses on the ward, in the community, the paramedics, the GPs, etc. All the ground staff. I agree with you. Patricia, he says, oh, this is priceless, isn't it? Has Keir got a stam? Has Keir got a stam? What? What I meant was, has Keir got a plan? Apparently, in some regards, he has, actually. I was just going through some of them. He's going to give Britain back their NHS. He's going to allow you to make self-referrals to specialists, which personally I think will be an absolute disaster. You've seen the state of the NHS and how people self-refer there, haven't you? But maybe I'm being a bit harsh. I'm sure you'll tell me if you think I am. And also, he's going to take back control. He's going to set a Take Back Control Act. If I didn't know any better, and I'm not saying this is a thing, it almost sometimes I think, is Dominic Cummings in there advising Keir Starmer?
Probably is.
I wish.
It's all a bit weird.
He's a very good strategist.
He's a very good strategist, but some of all this rhetoric that we're going to take back control, we're going to give you back your NHS. I don't know.
He's playing to win, Keir.
Yeah, he's playing to win.
Yeah, definitely.
And it would be a terrible thing for the Labour Party to say the only party who could give you back control were the Conservative Party. People do want control. People do want to be more in charge of their lives. And Labour's got to be for that. And there's bits of old socialism which are saying the government always knows best. But Keir Starmer's right to say no.
I can hear Barry in Wigan. He's shouting on his surfer. He's sitting there going, if Keir Starmer really believed about taking back control, he wouldn't have spent as long as he did trying to overturn the democratic referendum, the Brexit one. Anyway, I don't want to open up that can of worms because look at the time, it flies, doesn't it? Let's move on. Oxfam has released a report on the eve of the World Economic Forum. They do this every year. Long story short, it basically shows how big the gap is between the wealthy and those that don't. 1% apparently of Brits are wealthier than 2/3 of the country. Does it matter, Dominic?
Yeah, I think it does matter. I think too often issues of gross wealth inequality are made a strictly left-right issue. The right is sort of a caricature in itself in terms of it's like, oh, you know, we should be able to earn as much as we want on the free market, despite the fact the current market we have right now isn't that free. And then the left are like, tax the billionaires, and they seem to think there's this massive pot of money that we can just extract from billionaires and all of a sudden it's going to make everything OK. I'm a bit in the middle. I think that the idea that in times of recession, for example, that it's because, you know, there's no money left and we all need to be prudent and suffice with our energy bills rising, our food bills rising, and having our wages not rising in line with inflation, that we should all just have to deal with that. But personally, for me, you know, it's obvious that it's not that there's no money left. It's that money has been transferred somewhere else, and governments are complicit in that. Well, I don't know. I was reading a statistic that said their billionaires' wealth has risen more in the 24 months of COVID-19 than they had in 23 years combined. You've got big pharma companies allowed to rake in profits and avoid tax. Even, we were going to talk about green energy, but we decided not to. But even the offshore wind companies, you know how we're told that green energy is the future, it's going to be so cheap. Meanwhile, the offshore wind companies have been poo-pooing the government's green contract designed to get energy prices down and have instead opted for the free market, where they can rip taxpayers off and rake in billions. That, to me, is not fair, and we should be able to say that no matter what side of the aisle you're on.
John McTernan, where do you stand?
Oh, look, I think it's absolutely right that we should have more tax on wealth, on unearned wealth. There's most of the wealth that's been generated in this report's finding out is really going to people who own property. The larger amount of property, land or property buildings that you own, the more that will come to you. And the biggest unearned wealth in the country is, most people have earned a lot more if they bought a house in the 90s from owning a house than they have from working the jobs that they've got. There's something got to be... Margaret Thatcher understood that. Margaret Thatcher understood that you need fair access to property. That's why she did Right to Buy. Let so many working class people become owners of a house for the first time in their generation. That transfer of assets from the state to working people gave them a capital windfall that's given them independence, the ability to take back control for the decades since the Right to Buy. So I think that where there is a windfall of wealth, which there has been because of the historically low interest rates in the last decade, basically, there should be a windfall tax, some kind of wealth tax.
So would you apply that to Margaret that might be watching that bought a house in the 90s, to quote your example? She bought this house in the 90s, I don't know, say like 50 grand, whatever. I'm being silly with my numbers. And now Margaret's house, she's sitting in watching GB News, it's worth £1.5 million. Would you tax Margaret on a primary home?
No, the argument for the tax that's being introduced is the 5% tax on the wealthiest, and I think that 5% tax on the wealthiest could get us the kind of money that we need in Britain to have a fairer distribution. I think what Dominic was saying is in tune with where the public are, which is that some of the issues around fairness aren't left or right. They're actually just British values of fairness, and some people have got too far away. So it's like you were saying at the beginning of the show, we need to kind of we need to close that gap a little bit. And that's the British way, I think.
Well, I'll tell you what's not fair, how fast time flies when you're having fun, because I've got a lot more to say on that topic. I know Dominique's got a lot more to say on that topic. You guys at home do too. But we're going to come back after the break. The Home Office Minister, Robert Jenrick, has been in trouble for the way that he's been talking about Albanians, apparently. This is all becoming a bit of a political football, verbal lynchings, etc., being what is quoted. Where do you stand on it? Tell me, and I'll see you in 2.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament.
But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs. This is Jubes and Co, and I'm back with you till 7 o'clock tonight alongside me, the writer and broadcaster Dominique Samuels, and also John McTernan, the political strategist and former advisor to Tony Blair. We've just been talking about wealth tax. Let's have a look at what you guys have got to say on that. At home, Beverly says, no, we should not have a wealth tax. If that happens, all our millionaires will move away. We should reduce inheritance tax and increase the amount before tax to 2 million, says Bev. What, increase the amount generally before tax, or do you just mean inheritance? I would get rid of inheritance tax altogether, if you ask me. Going back to that whole situation about devolved administrations, it would be absurd, says Alan, if a devolved administration had the power to pass laws which impinge on existing UK laws. Well, of course, some matters are devolved, some are reserved, and this is devolution working, if you ask me, the way it should. But I know that you guys are... You're split. Steve says, I live in Scotland and this bill is an affront to women's rights and safety, not just in Scotland, but in the UK. Forget the SNP outrage and stand up for women. There you go. You tell me your thoughts. Moving on, the Albanian Foreign Minister has accused the Home Office Minister, Robert Jenrick, of, I quote, verbally lynching his country. That's after a Home Office video was released of Jenrick praising officials for deporting Albanians and sending them back, basically. The government has agreed a deal with Albania to return illegal migrants within 31 days. Dominique, your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to be cynical here. Oh. And I'm going to be cynical because we have to look at the track record of this government with regards to illegal migration. It's basically opened the floodgates and flooded our hotels with illegal migrants. So for Mr. Jenrick to say things like catch the Albanian, detain them, he's obviously building up the rhetoric to try and make it seem like this government is doing something. And the easiest way to do that is to target a specific group of people. So I am going to be cynical about that. This was a very political choice that, when you actually look at what's going on, probably doesn't wash. But at the same time, I wish the Albanian government was as concerned about the language being used by our ministers as they were about the fact that men, working-age men, are leaving their country in droves. Now, this is what we usually refer to as, you could say, brain drain. This is people that could prop up the Albanian economy and support that economy, leaving. Why are they not talking about that? But seriously, this is a policy of theirs that's not actually been widely talked about, but they are... they may pursue this amnesty on undeclared assets. So you can deposit up to €2 million in undeclared cash if you pay the government a tax. Which government? The Albanian government, right. Which will obviously be exploited by criminals. So you could say they're actually supporting these enterprises happening in our country.
John, thoughts?
Oh, look, I think Dominic's absolutely right. The government have got such a terrible track record on this. They're trying to change... It's a bit like Nicola Sturgeon. They're trying to change what the argument's about and by attacking Albanians. Robert Jenrick knows 80% of Albanians arriving in the UK claiming asylum get granted asylum. So... Do
they?
They do, yeah, 80%. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary that... Do
you think that's because people have got genuine asylum claims,
yes,
or do you think it's because people know how to play the system?
No, it's
definitely both.
The Home Office staff process this, and I think it's broadly similar to other nationalities, Syrians, Afghans, people who come from areas where they're oppressed. I don't know any of the cases, obviously, but I think Jenrick knows two things are happening. One is Albanians get processed and are allowed back. Another thing is the British government, because they will not work with the French, can't find a way to stop the small boats. It's a very simple thing. We could be processing applicants.
I'm not
in
sure
France
I agree with that.
And sending them back.
How are we not working with them when we keep committing millions and millions to actually work with them? Aren't we going to be patrolling?
That is the million-dollar question.
Now?
If the definition of not working with somebody is handing them tens of millions of pounds, please can I submit my application?
To not work
with
the Home Office.
Not to work with me, quite frankly. I'm up for it. Look at the time, everyone. That's all I do have time for tonight. Lots of you are A split, by the way, on all the topics that we've come in. Roger says, wealth tax in the rich. When should all this kick in? Easy, just higher, basically, than whatever I've got or I'm earning. That's interesting, because I always say that. Everyone thinks the wealthy is someone else. Many of you saying it's time to scrap devolution altogether.
I agree.
Is it? I'll do that another day. But for now, thank you very much. That's all I've got time for. Nigel Farage is up next. Nigel, good evening. What have you got for us?
Michelle, thank you. Good evening. Well, we got the Labour Party taking some really tough positions that you might have said in the past would have been on the right of politics, whilst the Conservative take positions perhaps that we would have thought in the past to be on the left. Are we now living in a period of non-binary politics? We'll debate that and much more. But first,